Hi everyone, this is Victoria. Since I've been having a rough few weeks, like I'm sure everyone has, and work isn't great, and life just all around sucks, I thought I would take some time to talk about a movie that ruins the book series that I loved as a kid. Yeah, and I was going to do a movie review. I'm not sure how much of this is actually going to be a review, which to me is like constructive criticism with the faith that it could have been a good movie. I have no such faith. Like, to review this would be like to review The Room or Trolls 2 or some other like horrible movie. Like, you would have to make a whole new movie in order to make a good movie out of that. I did not script this because I tend to talk more flat when I'm reading off of a script and my words tend to run together. So I wanted to see if I could make something that was more enjoyable without a script. So if you saw my last video and you're watching this one, tell me which one seems more personable and entertaining to you. Because the last one definitely had a script. A little disclaimer, I've noticed on Instagram that a lot of people who worked on Artemis Fowl like have very fond memories of it, and obviously not everybody on the film is to blame for how bad I think the film is. So really, I want to clarify that the only people I'm really holding responsible for how bad the film is are the corporate people who I'm guessing had a great deal to do with all the massive re-edits, and the director. I think that they really enjoyed working on the film and it was a very positive experience for them, and I do not begrudge them that at all. Like, I was thinking about yesterday how I have a lot of past projects that now I look back on and I'm like, ugh, that's so cringy. But I would not give up those experiences. I really loved working on those artistic endeavors at the time. And so, even though the outcome was amateur or bad, that doesn't mean that I was bad for making it or that the experiences I got out of it were bad. Like, really, that's probably the only positive thing that's come out of this, is the good experiences that the cast has had and how much loyalty they're showing for the film, which is actually very endearing. So, again, I am not against the cast and crew. I don't think that they should feel bad for enjoying this movie, enjoying making it. So, on with the criticism. So, I guess you could tell right off the bat, I didn't really like it. I wasn't offended. I knew going in it wasn't going to be good. It wasn't going to be true to the source material. I just hoped that, if they were going to do a kind of Spy Kids-esque film, that it would at least be a good film. Like, I love Spy Kids, so I would be totally down with the Spy Kids with fairies plot. Or, not plot, but like concept. Because they have that plot, it's just executed so poorly. So let's start with the good things about the movie. Most of the like landscapes, the backgrounds were amazing. Like, Fowl Manor was really cool. I liked that it wasn't just like this is a stereotypical English style manor and that's it. Like, they had some really cool room concepts, some really cool decor. Some of it I didn't understand. Like, the bull sofa, I was like, why is there a ginormous statue of a bull that is also a sofa? And then the puppet room, which is just, seems to be a room just for puppets. It's like, who is this for? And I've been told that, like, Angeline Fowl is actually in the original cut, so maybe the room of puppets had more to do with Angeline and her psychosis. But in the film, as it is now, it's just weird. But anyway, getting back to the positives, I really loved the landscape of Ireland. I don't really think the film crew can take credit for that, but it's gorgeous. I really want to go to Ireland now. I always have. The design for Haven itself is really cool, and I really liked a lot of the character designs. The costume designs were very diverse. That was super awesome and interesting. I wasn't completely sold on some of the LEP background designs. I felt they were kind of weirdly industrial. Maybe it's just my Homo sapienism speaking, but when I think police station, I don't think industrial. I think maybe messy, grungy, lots of yellow lighting, not lots of blue and stone and angles, personally. But again, I'm getting sidetracked off into negative things. I really like Josh Gad as Mulch Diggums. I don't like that he was the narrator, but I didn't mind it as much as some people did. He was the most charismatic. He obviously had a lot of fun with it. They also stayed the closest to his character. I've heard some people like criticizing that he was a giant dwarf and they're like, "Oh, he's just a human." Um I've heard one non-fan say that, which I'm like, well, if you knew what dwarves do in this context, then he's definitely a giant dwarf. Like, a human isn't able to dislocate their jaw and eat dirt and have sentient hair. That's not human at all. I should know I am one. Yeah, so that didn't bother me. I thought it was kind of lazy because they're like, oh, well, now we don't have to size him down. They did a lot of that. And I was like, it seems like you just changed the plot because it was easier for you. Like, oh, we don't have to deal with the fairies being 3 feet tall. We'll just make them all normal size, which I don't understand. Because then it'd be so easy for Holly to just be a normal person on the surface then. It'd be so easy for all the elves and a lot of the fairies to just live on the surface in hiding instead of being underground. But I digress. What else did I like? The soundtrack was really good in places. I really like Celtic music, so that was really fun. I like the design of the LEP suits for the most part. I like the wings, how they fold up and stuff. I think that's it. Oh my gosh. So, my main problems with the film, I didn't mind the trope so much. Again, I went into this thinking, this is not going to be anything like the original. I was kind of annoyed by the Aculos MacGuffin device because I was like, why even have this? Why? This is so dumb. Why even have it be the Aculos? Couldn't it just be like Artemis gets a hold of the book and that's like a big relic or something? Like, why does it have to be the Aculos, which then is never really explained? It's just like, it's the MacGuffin meets like a Deus Ex Machina. It does whatever you want. But another like big critique is there was so much exposition. I don't really notice exposition a lot of times unless it's like really super obvious. I think the last time I remember noticing exposition was in Wonder Woman when Wonder Woman's Diana's mom is putting kid Diana to bed and she starts telling her story and it came off like super exposition heavy to me. But even that was better than this, where there's these characters and they're barely characters, they're mouthpieces. These mouthpieces like telling us all this backstory. And I haven't watched it again to see how much of that backstory we even really needed. But it was so baffling to me because it was like a 94-minute film. So it's a short film with a very short story concept that's very basic. But it seemed like they tried to cram elements of all 4 of the first books in the series into this movie without using any of the plot or character for any of the movie. It was so confusing. So I spent like half of the movie with my friend who was watching it with, like yelling, "What is happening? Why is this happening? I'm so confused as to how this is so bad." Yeah, so like I was halfway through the film and I was like, there's not been an actual conversation between 2 characters. It's just been exposition the entire time. The only non-exposition conversations are part of the therapy session, which is a whole other can of worms. Oh my gosh. All these conversations are only partially character, and then there's an exposition. So Holly and Mulch's first conversation has some exposition, but it's done well. And then pretty much any anything Mulch says except for the narration has some character in it, and so that's fun. Like his interactions with Root. You never see him interact with Foley, which is sad because, yeah, there wasn't enough Foley in this. He just kind of shows up for 10 seconds and is poorly animated and then he leaves. Which, I mean, spares us the poor animation, but I'm sad that we didn't get to see more of that actor. And his design was cool. So yeah, the exposition was really annoying. And then there were the plot and theme problems. Like, it barely had a plot, so you would, or theme, so you would think, oh, then there can't really be a problem then. No. This is where I circle back to the therapy session scene. That was therapy session scene, for those of you who don't know, was taken from the second book. And in the second book, it sets up the theme of the book, which is Artemis has no respect for anyone outside of himself at the beginning of the book. By the end of the book, he has two people who he does very much admire and respect. And that's big character growth for this character. In this, they bring up that same idea that Artemis doesn't respect anybody. And then they also bring up another possible theme of him being burdened by the family name, which at this point you think is his dad is a traveling collector. So really, even who cares about living up to that family name? Like, yes, being a collector is super cool, but it's not like his dad is really famous or infamous or anything at this point. He's just an art collector, and that's it. So that's a weird thing to bring up. But that could have been an interesting story. Artemis is doing his first solo venture, and he wants to live up to his dad's name. Or you could go with the book 2 theme of Artemis doesn't look up to anyone or respect anyone. But that theme, the respecting theme, is automatically thrown out the window when they later show scenes of him with his dad, and he obviously respects his dad. Which also makes no sense, because Mulch exposits to us that Artemis is a super smart, super scientifically inclined kid, and yet he listens to his dad talk about fairies and isn't at all concerned with his dad's weird fascination with them. Again, it'd be one thing if his dad was a linguist or something, but then he would have a reason to be so obsessed with fairies and to teach his son all about the fairies, because this goes beyond Artemis Sr. and Artemis Jr. being Irish and the father passing down the lore of their land to the son. This is like him training Artemis to be ready for when he meets the fairies. And Artemis, the scientifically minded prepubescent, isn't like, my dad is really weird about this. If he thinks this is real, then I either, 1, am going to reject my father, or 2, I need to get him help because this is insane. But he does neither of those things. He just takes it in stride. But later you realize that he didn't ever believe that fairies were real. So it's like, why were you so blasé about your father, who's just an art collector, being obviously very obsessed with fairies? So, like, an easy way, I think, to fix this problem would be to, 1, just easily just go by the book. But anyway, if you had to have Colin Farrell in the movie, you could do a couple of things. You could have him show up in flashbacks, and I was talking to Ivy Monroe about this, and she like suggested that he would show up in flashbacks, and so you could like keep him there in the canon, and then you could also set up Artemis knows that his dad is a criminal mastermind and wants to take on the family name, and so this is his first solo venture. And then I was thinking, if you wanted to make it more of a son and father bonding type of movie, it could be Artemis rejects everything fairy. He's very scientifically minded. And so he and his father don't have a very good relationship because the dad is like desperately trying to get his son to care about this thing that is very life-threatening, but Artemis doesn't because he doesn't believe fairies exist. And then his dad gets abducted by fairies, and Artemis has to come to terms with this and decides to take on the fairies in his own way by using science. That could have been a really interesting story and kept the bare bones of this weird thing that they wanted to create outside of the really interesting, character-driven original book. What else? Oh, the cinematography was atrocious. I've heard like some people talk about how they actually like the cinematography, and there were certain shots, like again, the shots of Ireland were gorgeous. Ireland is gorgeous. It's very easy to get that. But the dialogue scenes were edited very weird. It seemed a lot of times like they were trying to get through the conversation so fast. Why didn't you give them more time? This is a short film. If they're so pressed for time that they have to cut the dialogue to come like bam, 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 one right after another, then why didn't you give them more time? Theaters are used to like 2.5 hour movies now. Why is this thing so short? Like there was one scene in particular where they're in LEP Plaza and Rude is talking to Holly. She's sending Holly on her first mission. And Holly's like, really? Yes. Oh my gosh, Commander, just go. Okay. It was like, just like that. And then it would like switch between the two of them super fast. It was like them in profile. So it was like a really weird cutting thing. And then the very next shot was Foley leaping down towards the camera. Because he was like looking at their conversation. And I was like, what? Why? Why is this? There are so many weird editing choices like that. And again, I am not trained in this. So if you are even like sort of competent at editing, I will not notice if you are competent. I won't even notice a few bad shots. My brain might go, oh, that was kind of weird. But it won't connect that it was because of the editing. This I noticed right away, which is very bad. A very bad sign. Another thing was there was a lot of like early 2000s editing. Like there's a deleted scene where the LEP are like fitting mulch with tech, which was just a bizarre scene anyway, and thank God they deleted it. But it was like the camera was up above this huddle of LEP officers and they were like chittering and you could tell that it was like sped up. And I was like, what is happening? And then there was other parts where things went into slow motion or sped up and you could tell they weren't shot with a camera to be slowed down or sped up. And they just did it in post and it was so obvious. And then there was like a lot of tech that I didn't understand. And then they were like expecting me to know like when they were pressing all these buttons what was happening on screen and I didn't know. And then there was like the whole weird time stop thing, which was like, what? I thought people were like legit dying in that scene because the time stop was like coming down and eating people. Which, I mean, to be fair, kudos to them for trying to show what the time stop did. Because in the original book, it's also kind of confusing. Maybe I'm just stupid, and if you want to clarify in the comments, I would be very grateful. Yeah, it was kind of weird because it was like, okay, so I'm guessing that time stops inside the manor, and so it keeps people from getting out. But people can come in. And in the film, it seemed kind of like in order to get into a time stop, you had to have a certain kind of technology on. That's what I'm guessing. They never tell you that because also in the Italian wedding scene, they deploy a time stop and Holly's able to move around within the time stop, but no one else is. But that was also confusing because at the manor, everyone's able to move around, but it's like right outside the time stop that everything slows down. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's like my entire that's my summary of this movie. I don't know. I don't know what happened. So let's go character by character and I'll give my impressions. I'll start with like the least important and work my way up to the most important. Opal Boy. Stupid. She should not have been in this film. They should have at least unmasked her. The only reason I can think of that she has a mask on is because of potential sequels that we know will never happen. We know her, it's Opal Boy. So, unless that's an alias, it's no other character in the movie. So there's no mystery element, so she doesn't need to wear the hood. That's dumb. That's all I have to say about that. Next is Colin Farrell as Artemis Sr., and he was fine. He didn't have a lot to do, and a lot of his lines were cheesy, but it was fine, I guess. I mean, he's so divorced from Artemis Fowl Sr. in the books that it's like, whatever. Angeline Fowl is dead, so there's that. Root is fine. I actually liked Judi Dench's portrayal when she actually decided to act. But again, she did not have a lot to work with as far as dialogue. Like, there was a deleted scene where she is talking to Foley and she's like, "How do I look? I haven't been face to face with a human before." And I was like, that's so cute. I like that, like, that she kind of has this little vanity thing that she wants to, like, look good to represent her people well. I was like, that's really cute. So I thought it was really cute that Foley told her she was gorgeous. Again, character, not exposition. So, and, like, that was acted well. Her saying top of the morning was hilarious. I could not tell if that was, like, meant to be funny or meant to be, like, super cool. And I just thought it was hilarious. But it was great. Her interacting with Mulch is great. Anyone interacting with Mulch is great because he's the only character. Foley, as I said, didn't see enough of him to really make a judgment. It seemed like the actor could emote, which was nice. But we didn't get any character from him except for he likes science. There's so little character in this. Oh my gosh. Juliet, again, no character at all except for she can do kendo and she is quirky. Other than that, she's useless to the plot, barely has any lines, does nothing. Who else? Cudgeon. Cudgeon probably should have been farther down on the list, but I forgot about him. They never explain why he's in prison. There's an implied betrayal, but never who he betrayed or why he betrayed them or when or what. Why did they let him out of prison? Who is Opal Cowboy that she can get him out of prison? Like, I mean, we know who she is in canon, but who is she in this book, in this movie? Because obviously everyone else is drastically different. And he was fine. Again, like, there were some weird, very, very weird dialogue lines. Butler was okay, but again, he didn't have any character. He was like an exposition mouthpiece the entire time. I wasn't even sure whose butler he was. In the deleted scenes, it said that he was actually Artemis Fowl Sr.'s butler, which makes a lot of sense because in one of the last scenes of the film, when Artemis Sr. is recovered and they reunite with him, Butler hugs him. Because you're like, whoa, I didn't know that their relationship is of that caliber. But when you find out in the deleted scenes that Butler was supposed to be his bodyguard and he failed, that makes a lot more sense. Sort of. And you can tell, like, he's a good martial artist. I don't know about martial artist. He knows kendo. He can fire weapons. He obviously cares about Artemis. But that's all you know about him. And I'm omitting everything exposited because you could say anything. Mulch talks about how he trained in all these different places and blah, 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 blah. But none of that really comes into play. Like, you don't see him being like a great martial arts expert because he doesn't even fight the troll like he does in the books. He like throws things at the troll, but he doesn't fight the troll. The troll kind of sabotages itself, and Holly and Artemis kind of work together to defeat the troll, but not really. It's dumb. Juliet is Butler's niece, not his sister, which whatever, but there isn't even really like a bond between them, which is what in the book kind of shakes Butler's faith in Artemis. He's like, oh, you've put my sister in danger. I don't care if you put me in danger, but leave my sister out of this kind of thing. And there's none of that. If they didn't mention that she was his niece, again, if they hadn't given us exposition, I would not have known that they were even related. And then there's Holly. The actress, Laura, she does a really good job, I think. I don't think she was directed very well for some scenes, but she has good chemistry with Josh Gad, who plays Mulch. And she seems very, like, upbeat and very passionate. She was really good at emoting. And you got more character about Holly. She was upset that her dad was gone, who had mysteriously died off screen, and you never saw him, you never knew how he died. You can infer why he died, but not when. It was just kind of like, eh. They might have at one point said a year had passed. I don't know. Holly is very resourceful, quick on her feet. She saves humans. She misses her dad. That's all I know about her. Whereas in the book, Holly disobeyed orders. You got that a little bit. She was very reckless, like pushing herself to the limits of her magic. She was very loyal, she was proud, she was very forgiving, and she wanted to save Juliet, and she saved Butler even though he was complicit in her kidnapping. She had a really like sharp wit. She was obviously friends with Foley. She had very complicated relationships with everyone, where she has pretty much no relationship with anyone in the film except for Mulch. Even though they say that her and Artemis are friends at the end, it's like, are they really though? Again, there hasn't been like a lot of on-screen character building between the two of them. It's just like, oh, our dads are both dead and or missing and we're friends. We're friends now. And that's it. It was like the Martha scene from Batman v Superman all over again. Only for kids and worse. And then there's Artemis. I don't know if Ferdia Shaw is a good actor. I think he's good at acting like a normal kid. I don't think he's good at acting like Artemis Fowl. Artemis has like a quiet charisma where he makes people afraid of him just by him kind of talking to them for a couple minutes. You definitely see how he's really outshined by the other actors. Like in the first instance when he's on screen for the first time with the therapist, I could tell that that therapist was a very accomplished actor and Ferdia was not. And that's not his fault. He's a kid. And to be fair, I don't think any child could really act Artemis. I mean, one, they would need a much better script. I think a lot of the problem also was with the script. But when he was saying Artemis's lines verbatim from the second book, he still sounded like he was tripping over his words and kind of mushing them. Kind of like I do when I'm reading from a script. Like, some of his words were very carefully enunciated. Like, he's like, I gotta get this out right. Other times it was just kind of smushed together. And I don't think it was his accent. Like, I feel bad for not liking his performance, but I don't think it was that good. And that's nothing against him. Again, I have no basis of comparison. Like, he could be great, and maybe as an actor he's just very reliant on his director, and the directing wasn't good. I don't know. He looked like on par for an Artemis character, but not my Artemis, which is fine. Like, again, like, there were some, when this movie was in development hell, there were some actors that people were like, oh, this guy, oh, this guy, oh, this guy. They are good actors now as adults, but I don't even know if they could have done a good job at Artemis. I don't know. We will never know. This is why I really want Artemis Fowl to be a cartoon, because then you can have a seasoned actor who's a little bit older playing the character without, like, making him look older. Then you can make everyone the right height, and you can give people ridiculous proportions, and you can do all this stuff without ruining the immersion. Maybe I never would have really liked this movie because it wasn't a cartoon. So I also need to talk about the directing. I kind of hinted with this when I was talking about Artemis. I like Kenneth Branagh as a director. I don't like everything he's directed, but I've not hated anything that I've seen that he's directed. I really like what I've seen of his Shakespeare. I like Thor. I think it's underrated, and I would argue that the parts of Thor that aren't good are the parts where he's being forced to toe the line of superhero movies. Cinderella was fine. I liked Murder on the Orient Express. So what happened? What happened, Kenneth Branagh? Why did you do this to us? Did you think kids were stupid? Did you think that they needed, like, this weird directing style? I know you can at least direct conversation. Like, that's all that Shakespeare is conversation. I know you can do this. Why did this turn out so bad? I don't know what happened with the directing. It seemed very amateur in a lot of places. Some things, some of the more wacky style choices, I was like, okay, this could work if it was more consistent instead of just being this, like, one scene. Like when Holly was going to the Italian wedding and she uses her visor to track the troll and she sees the bones of a cow and it looks kind of cartoony, and I was like, that could have been a cool filter to have for some of these, like, effects, but that's the only time they did that. They also didn't go into the technology of these fairies very much. That's a big draw of the original series, is that these fairies have technology, and that technology is explained a lot. But in this, they have all this exposition about everything else, but they don't explain how their weapons can morph and what powers them and the wings, how those work. None of that's explained. Which, sometimes is fine. Like, you can kind of tell by what they're doing, what they're using it for, what it does. But, like, one thing that could have used explaining, besides the time stops, was that they can jam magic now. Like, they totally got rid of the ritual from the books. So it's kind of inferred that their magic isn't natural to them. Like, you never see Holly use her magic when she's outside of her LEP uniform. She's never outside of her LEP uniform. Like, they jam her magic later on in the film. How? How? Explain, movie. Like, explain something that matters. Like, stop explaining all of this stuff that you should be showing us. Like, don't stop explaining to us how smart Artemis is and show us how Holly's magic works. Please. And that the only reason why they jammed her magic was so Butler could fake die and then be brought back, which again, that whole thing about him dying was stupid because one, Juliet, his actual blood relative, wasn't there. Two, Artemis all of a sudden cares about Butler, which they've been companions this whole time, but have never shown that they actually like each other very much. And then Holly, like, walks out of the room for some reason, and then gets her magic back and comes right back into the room, because they needed that dramatic tension, I guess. And then again, they bring Butler into the puppet room to die, which is the last room in the house I'd ever want to die in. Oh my gosh, this movie. It is crazy because, like, I've liked bad movies. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time is Strange Magic, which is not only bad from a narrative standpoint in some ways, but has actual problematic elements in it. It's so bizarrely bad that I like picking it apart. This is just normal, boring bad. The thing bizarre about this is how this ever even got made. Watching the deleted scenes, they obviously had a whole other movie at one point. Like, there's a scene which, in this one tiny little scene, has more character than the entire 94-minute film. And it's called Mulch Meets Butler. So Mulch has broken in, Holly runs in, and she's yelling to arrest Artemis. So this is already out of the canon of the movie, because Artemis in the movie releases Holly because their dads are both missing and they love their dads. But this is inferring that they're not on good terms, which means he didn't release her, she escaped, like in the book. So she's yelling that Artemis should be arrested. Artemis is being, like, arrogant and cool and collected, and you have to do what I say or you're gonna lose your magic. And Mulch is like, oh no, wait, I don't have magic. And I am huge, so what are you gonna do? So you've got, like, Mulch being cocky and sarcastic, and then Butler comes in and is actually big and menacing. And I'm like, this is more character and more close to canon than the entire movie. What happened? So there have been people calling for, like, the release of the Culfer Cut, which is this alleged first draft of the movie that was actually true to the book, and then they cut it apart and Frankensteined it into what it became for God knows why. Personally, I just kind of want to cut my losses at this point, and then later on down the line actually have a really good adaptation. And again, I don't want a live action adaptation of this, personally. I don't. I think it would be a really good cartoon miniseries. Like, maybe have a couple books per season. Like, I think the first book could make a good 2.5-hour movie. So you wouldn't need a bunch of episodes to film the first book. You can put the first 2 in there, and then you get a full arc for Artemis. So you have 3 or 4 episodes of the first book, you go on like a 2-month hiatus, then you release the Arctic incident. And then you've got Artemis going from the villain of the first story to being the hero of the second story. And he's on his way to redemption. Yeah, like, adapting the whole series is another can of worms. I think the only thing more baffling than this movie would be this movie got a sequel. Like, that would be just the most bizarre, stupid thing to ever happen. But yeah, so let's see. I should probably wrap this up. Thankfully, I didn't watch this by myself. I watched it with my best friend and sometimes with my goddaughter. I really like watching movies with kids. Some of my fondest theater memories are when there were children there. One time, like, almost made me cry. I was seeing Into the Spider-Verse, and it was just me and my brother, and then there was a seat between me and a little boy with his mom. And the little boy was black, and at one point when Miles was on screen, he, like, taps on the seat between us to get my attention, and he points at the screen, and he's like, "That's Spider-Man!" I was like, "Yeah, it is!" It was so cute. So, I love watching movies with kids. It's not a deterrent for me at all. And so it was fun watching it with Chloe because she was enamored with Mulch. She wasn't there for the whole film. Like, she kind of went to her room and played and came out and, did whatever. But she liked the man who ate sand. And she's like, and I like the girl, talking about Holly, and I like the boy. And she's talking about Artemis. And she said she didn't like someone, but she didn't like the ogre. That's what she called the troll. So that made it, like, somewhat enjoyable for me. Again, I wasn't angry while watching the movie. It didn't make me sad. I'm still not sad because I've known that this was coming for a long time, this failure. I do feel bad for the actors who didn't get a chance to, like, act in a really good adaptation. I feel bad for Owen Colfer and, like, the crew, and obviously a lot of hard work and love was put into it. Like, I would love to get an art book because some of the visual development that went into Haven City specifically is gorgeous. I don't think this movie was done completely cynically. What was cynical was the screenwriting and whatever behind the scenes shenanigans that corporate was doing. Actually, now that I think about it, Artemis Fowl would make a really interesting indie movie. If you can somehow take out the blockbuster element of it and kind of just bare bones make it about the characters, don't make it all about the visual spectacle. I think at least for the first book that could work. But anyway, I don't think it's a surprising thing to be like, yeah, I didn't really like the film. Probably won't be rewatching it for a while. If I do, it'll not be the whole thing because I was pretty bored through a lot of it because of all the exposition. There were some positives to it for sure, and I hope that the fandom will move past it pretty fast. So that all of the discussions on Tumblr and sites like that aren't just how much they hate the movie. I really like going through the Artemis Fowl tag on Tumblr and being like, oh, these are fun headcanons that people have, and oh, look at this fan art. And right now it's just all, like, sad screaming, which is understandable. But I feel like we can move past this is by making more fan art and stuff. Thank you for listening to my long, rambly, unscripted rant, and I'll see you in the next random video I do.